It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. On this Monday after Christmas, it's Boxing Day. Well, it's officially Boxing Day. It's the bank holiday in the UK. Boxing Day, of course, is the day after Christmas, except when it falls on a Saturday or Sunday, then it's officially recognized as a bank holiday on Monday. There you go. I know you needed to know that. A lot of us don't know what Boxing Day is. Every year I look it up because I'm curious, but it's not very exciting, so by the next day I've already forgotten. And so the next year I have to look it up again. It's a Brit thing. And the holiday was established around the British Empire, so places like Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, I guess, celebrate it. And that's kind of a weird little holiday where the day after Christmas, the rich folks who had a really nice Christmas, of course they couldn't be bothered on the holiday itself, but the day after, apparently they boxed up goodies for the servants. I was like, here you go. Here are leftovers. We made you work all day. See, the servants have to work all day on Christmas because the rich people are partying. So Boxing Day was like the day after. It's like, all right, you guys can have the day off today. And here, box up the leftovers. They're all yours. Boxing Day is like a doggy bag day. And then I guess it evolved a bit to include general acts of charity, giving to the poor. But yeah, anyway, that's what I read about Boxing Day. And then it also got, for some reason, very much related to kind of outdoor activities and sporting activities. I don't know. I don't get the Brits. I've told you before, I'm Scots-Irish, but I don't really relate. I don't quite get it. I feel much more affinity for my Scandinavian side. I'm half Scots-Irish and I'm half Swedish, but I feel more Swedish. I kind of like those folks better. I like the notion of Scandinavia. I like their mythology is kind of more fun, and the way they've evolved over the centuries is more interesting. The fact that they're social democrats, I like that. I love the cold and the fjords and I just love the idea of the ice cold lake and then jump in the sauna, that sort of thing. Or no, it's the other way around. Yeah, you get in the sauna, you get all steamed up, and then you jump out into the icy lake. So those are the kind of things I relate to. My Swedish half is more pronounced. Oh, that reminds me, I saw an article this week about Hygge, or Hygge. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce it. Let's see, did I save that article? Let me see if I can find it. No, I didn't save it. Here, I'll just look it up again. I remember the headline said something like, in fact, I'll type it in right now. You don't need Hygge. You need social democracy, or something like that. Yeah, you don't want... Boy, I'm going to have to just decide how to pronounce this thing. I'll look that up too. Okay, here.
Hygge.
Okay, there it is. Well, it sounds like she's saying Hygge, but I think it's more of a Hygge. It's one of those non-English words that you can't really say with an English accent, especially an American English accent. You have to actually adopt the accent in order to say it correctly. Hygge. This is something I often complain about when American speakers are expected to take on a different accent in order to say an international word. Now, this makes me sound like the bad guy, so I'm always a little hesitant when I talk about this. But it's It's the Amy Goodman syndrome. When she insists on calling Greta Thunberg, Greta Thunberg. See, I don't think that America, and this makes me sound like the bad guy. So I'm guessing I might be wrong, but I always kind of resent when American speakers are expected to go outside of their own natural accent in order to be politically correct. So, for example, if a British speaker was saying my name, Charles, he might say Charles. Now, I wouldn't demand of him that he break out of his accent to Americanize my name. In other words, as he's speaking in his British accent, which I'm no good at accents, I've told you this before, I wouldn't expect him to break out of his accent and instead of saying Charles, say Charles. You don't have to break out of your accent to be politically correct. Anyway, that's a side note. We were talking about Hygge, Hygge. And it became very popular a couple of years ago. There were memes about it. It's this Scandinavian notion of being cozy or comfortable. And it's especially coveted in the winter months when it gets cold. Well, in a nice little provocative headline, you don't want Hygge, I'm doing it again. Wait, what was it again? Let's hear it again.
Hygge.
Okay, all right. Hygge. So the headline is, you don't want Hygge, you want social democracy. Nice little provocative headline there. And of course, this came out just before Christmas. Holiday season, everybody wants it. You want to get cozy by the fire. You want to have some eggnog, watch an old familiar movie, be with loved ones. Get all cozy and holiday feeling. That's Hygge. But as this little essay points out by Megan Day, I'll give her credit, staff writer at Jacobin, where I'm reading this, she points out that if you're not able to quite achieve this little personal utopia for yourself, it has more to do with the political economy you live under. You want this perfect little gathering, but as she writes, you can't have it because you couldn't spring for a plane ticket, or relatives are in town, but times are tight, and it seemed irresponsible to pass up the Christmas overtime pay. Maybe you had to work. Maybe everything circumstantially fell into place, but you can't relax. You're eyeing your inbox, anxious about the work that's not getting done. Your last-minute shopping, pinching pennies, thinking Scrooge had some fair points. Or you're hiding in your childhood bedroom, binge-watching television and scrolling social media because a rare break from the pressure of daily life feels more like an occasion to zone out than to celebrate and be merry. Either way, you feel terrible because you know that someone somewhere is literally roasting chestnuts on an open fire and you're missing out. And then she kind of takes a little time to remind us that Hygge, Hygge, comes from a Norwegian word that means well-being. But the Danes kind of popularized the notion as this very sort of specific wintertime cozy kind of feeling, being at home and comfortable. So I guess the point is that it's not so much the warm fire and the eggnog and the warm blanket. Those are just sort of the symbols, the icons of the concept. What's most important is that feeling, the feeling of security, of contentment. And as the author points out, that's hard to achieve in this weird capitalist dystopia we live under, and why so many of us over this last weekend, and every year, Christmas is just filled with anxiety, worried about work and money. So many of the pressures that we feel have to do with the insecurities embedded in capitalism, in the world we live in. Insecurity itself is the cornerstone of the American economic system. Insecurity is the motivation on both ends of the equation. It's what gets you up every morning to get up and go to work. In a system that drives wages down for that very purpose, to sort of keep you on that edge, to keep you insecure. It's the opposite of Hygge, the exact opposite. And that same insecurity then is used as a motivation to sell you things. Well, you have to have this and you have to have that. You have to have the latest virtual reality headset. You have to buy your spouse an SUV or they'll think you don't love them. Insecurity, anxiousness, anxiety. They're not only the result of the American economic culture, they are the very heart of it, the driving force, the defining characteristic. So when hygge became a fashionable thing a couple of years ago, and of course that's how we here in America come upon ideas like this. Kind of overnight, they explode, and they're just memes and books and articles, and there's no escaping it for a while. Well, that's what happened with this concept a couple of years ago. And it was immediately Americanized. It became all about being able to buy, being able to afford to purchase this feeling. Well, if you're able financially, yeah, you can have a really nice cabin, and you can invite your loved ones, and you can have just the right colors and textures and interior design. You can have that fireplace. If you're a regular schlub living in some crummy apartment in the middle of some city, you can't have this feeling because it's now been Americanized. And now it's all about the trappings. And it gets turned on its ear as though somehow you can buy your way into that contentment, into that happiness. When the truth is the exact opposite. The contentment, the comfort, the happiness comes from living a life where you actually are secure. You don't have to work your ass off at 3 different jobs to put your kids through college or to pay your medical bills. You feel the comfort of that safety net. Yeah, back to the headline. You don't want hygge, you want social democracy. Yeah. You want a civilized, contemporary, modern welfare state that recognizes that every single person, regardless of their station, has the exact same right to the basics: food, housing, healthcare, education. These are not things we compete for. These aren't things we fight over. These aren't things that you can achieve only at the expense of others not achieving them. That's where we live. That's where we are. I'm not talking about a big extravagant life. I'm talking about the basics, the basic social security of life, to borrow a phrase. The Social Democrats get it. They completely get it. It's very much akin to the common notion, no justice, no peace, right? Well, if you want peace, you better damn well work on justice. And it's the exact same equation when you're talking about inner peace, contentment. Yeah, you shouldn't have to buy those things. You shouldn't have to buy them. Well, regardless of your station in life, I hope you found some peace and happiness over the holiday. I found a bit of it here and there. I toggled back and forth between holiday spirit and anxiety. I'll confess. Boy, it's funny when Christmas is over, how quickly it goes. I had a friend in my theater days. She likened it to the end of a run. As soon as the final curtain drops on the last performance, the stage manager hollers, "Strike!" And you just get right to work. And everything starts, the scenery starts getting dismantled, and everybody takes off their makeup and costumes and gets to work, and they just break down the whole thing. And all that's left is an empty stage. It's so immediate. It's so final. Strike! Yeah, that's a theater term if you're not a theater person. Strike the set. That means just dismantle. Take it apart. Put it all back in storage for the next time. Yeah, that's strike. That's the big night, everybody. And if it's a high school or college theater or a community theater, the entire company, all the actors, everybody, regardless of your job in the play, everybody participates in strike. And it sometimes takes much of the night. And you all go out and have an early breakfast when it's all over. Yeah, if you've never been part of a theater, you're really missing out. It's a pretty cool culture and unique in and of itself. Yeah, there's certain things about theater that just don't exist anywhere else. Closest thing in my experience is maybe if you're on a team, if you're on a sports team, there's some of that camaraderie. But yeah, if you've never done theater, do yourself a favor. Make it a hobby, at least one production. Find your closest community theater and just volunteer. They'll take anybody. You can pull curtains, you can build sets, you can help with makeup and costumes, you can audition and be on stage, you can do any number of things. They need everybody. And you'll be part of this great little family, and you'll put on a show, and it'll run for a little while. Maybe in community theater, you do it a couple of weekends. And during the production, after rehearsal, you hang out a little bit. You have these great kind of conversations while you're hammering nails and building sets and painting backdrops. And then when it's all over, strike. Everybody gets together. Everybody works. It's pretty great. It's really pretty great. You meet new people. You make friends. You're in this great sort of collaborative effort. It brings everybody kind of immediately closer. Yeah, do theater. I just highly recommend it. And anybody can do it. These community theaters, everybody's got a day job. And for the course of a month or two, a couple of hours every evening, you're part of the production, you're part of the rehearsal process. And then again, like I say, it runs for a couple of weekends, and then you have the big strike party. And oh, there's nothing better. Do theater. You really ought to do theater. I recommend it. Oh, and back to the whole hygge thing and being comfortable and secure. I had a thought over the holiday weekend because I took the opportunity to watch a couple of old movies. And not just the Christmas movies, which I did. The standard sort of big-name Christmas movies. Ralphie and his BB gun and Miracle on 34th Street and White Christmas and all of them. But I was in an especially lazy mood. I felt I had the right to just veg out and watch movies. So I watched a couple of old black and whites that I hadn't seen. But I got to thinking, again, on this anxiety cult we live in that mostly has to do with money. I kind of thought, if we were able to achieve social democratic utopia, and especially to the extreme I'd like to see it, where money basically doesn't exist, how would we ever have drama again? Because name any story, name any movie, and at the heart of it is going to be some economic problem. Well, here, let's just go back and look at some of these Christmas movies. Well, just at random. Here, how about The Grinch? Dr. Seuss's The Grinch. Well, it's really the entire point, isn't it? The Grinch steals all the trappings of Christmas in the mistaken idea that he's stealing Christmas. But then he learns from the people of Whoville that it's all in the heart. And the moral of the story, the lesson, if you will, is one that only the Grinch can learn. The people of Whoville already knew this. Dr. Seuss created a world where people understood that material possessions and trappings weren't the point, and they never were. So ideally, at some point in the future, when we've achieved this understanding, some young child will watch The Grinch and not quite understand. What's the Grinch doing? Why is he unhappy? They won't get it. And the other big one, It's a Wonderful Life. Oh my God, it's all about money. It's at the heart of the story. This sort of Job-like struggle that George Bailey goes through. Always struggling with money and the necessities of life. Can't have the adventures he dreamed of as a boy, as a young man. To see the world, to learn, to build things. And the constant battle against Mr. Potter, who rules Bedford Falls with an iron hand because he's got the money to do it. The whole movie. And then in the end, how is he saved? Literally by a big giant basket of cash. Everybody gets together and they chip in. His rich jerk of a friend, yep, good old Sam Wainwright, who was a war profiteer, made his fortune selling guns and ammunition. Oh, he's the big savior at the end. Wires, oh, here, you can have all the cash you need. Yeah, the lesson of the movie, as Clarence writes in the book, that friends are what make a man rich. And then the final toast to my brother George Bailey, the richest man in town, because he has friends. Well, isn't that nice? But he's also got that big basket of cash. That movie was all about money. How do you even make that movie? How do you write that story in a world where we're all secure and money doesn't run our lives? We're going to have to think of new stories. Maybe that's why the Swedes especially are so expert in this existential ennui. Because they figured out a long time ago that if you're going to have some sort of dramatic problem or conflict to overcome in your story, it's got to be some sort of inner existential conflict. Ingmar Bergman wasn't going to make some pedestrian story about somebody losing their job. And of course, the most famous Christmas story of them all, the quintessential story, Dickens' A Christmas Carol, there again, without money as the central force of our lives, that story doesn't exist. It only comes out of a very particular way of living that still, in spite of all progress achieved since Dickensian times, still very much alive and very well understood. The haves and the have-nots, the noble struggle of the poor to still find happiness, the wretched loneliness of the miser. These are archetypes that we're completely familiar with still, but would be rendered meaningless in a successful, functioning social democracy. So when we achieve that, what kind of stories will we create? And over time, will we still be able to relate to the old stories? Will Scrooge and Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim be characters that we relate to? Or will we just be baffled by them? Like, what's going on? Well, I'm willing to risk that. I'd love to find out. I'd love to find out what kind of stories we write when we live in a social democracy. And fear and want and insecurity are a thing of the past. I'd be very happy for that trade-off. We'll come up with ways to entertain ourselves. We'll come up with stories. I don't know what they'll be, but I'm very happy to take that trade-off. But we're pretty far from that. We're awfully far from that now. Yeah, we have no trouble relating to those stories. And in fact, just a couple of days before Christmas, did you see this? In defense of Scrooge, whose thrift blessed the world, the Wall Street Journal wrote an editorial. Phil Graham and Mike Solon, let's give these guys credit. In the 1840s, Dickens didn't see how businessmen like his hero were already lifting mankind from poverty. So, yeah, Wall Street Journal wrote an editorial in praise of Scrooge. No, not the Scrooge of Christmas morning, who found redemption and repented, giving up his evil ways. No. The original Scrooge from the first few scenes, where he's a miser and he's making all sorts of money. This, according to the Wall Street Journal, is the Scrooge we should praise and emulate. We should all accumulate as much money as possible. When he says to Marley, "Well, you were a good man of business," and Marley replies, "Business? Mankind was my business." No, Marley's got it wrong, according to the Wall Street Journal. No, business is business, and you make a lot of money. It's the standard trickle-down conservative tripe we've been hearing for our entire lives. But yeah, Scrooge makes a lot of money, which creates jobs, creates taxes. And as this Wall Street Journal editorial piece points out, historically, late 1800s, wages were rising, working conditions, living conditions were actually on the rise. So they make what they think is a very convincing argument, but it's just so predictable. And it's so just right out of the playbook. Who cares that Bob Cratchit can barely feed his family? Who cares that they live in a little shack and they all have to huddle around the one fire? Who cares if Tiny Tim is going to die because they can't afford the medical attention he needs? This is not an editorial from 1896. This is an editorial from last week. To cling to this idea that rich people just need to accumulate more wealth in order to keep the wheels turning on the economy, and that that's going to lift all boats somehow, is such a fantastical, ridiculous notion. It's been disproved time and time again, and still they cling to it. They just cling to this idea. Time and time again, we've seen the evidence. You may have seen just very recently a new study from London School of Economics, the most recent and comprehensive study of its kind, looked at data from over the last 50 years and found that tax cuts for the rich just widened inequality and nothing trickled down. And there was no significant effect on jobs or growth. Lots of articles on this last week. I'm looking now at The Guardian, Robert Reich's take on it. Yeah, stock markets continue to hit record highs. Rich get richer and richer. We keep hearing about billionaires, the billionaire class. The number is now up to 1.9 trillion, if you're interested. That's how much wealth gain the billionaires have made in 2020. $1.9 trillion. And forget about the pandemic. I mean, that obviously that makes things even worse. 8 million have fallen into poverty over that same year. More than 20 million Americans are jobless. The same amount are risking eviction as we speak. 26 million are going hungry. And of course, the pandemic exacerbating all those problems, but all of those problems were there already. And they have been for the last 50 years of this ridiculous austerity program and this religious conviction to trickle down. So when a lot of us saw this headline, you can imagine the comment thread like, no duh. Like, no kidding, it doesn't work. We know this, study after study, and now this big comprehensive confirmation. But the evidence has been clear forever that very rich folks accumulating more and more money doesn't do a damn thing except make other people poor, make them wage slaves. And then Christmas rolls around once a year, and then you have your little golf tournament or formal gala, and you write a big giant novelty check, and you give $1 million to charity. And, oh, everything's all right. Yeah, if Dickens were here today, I don't think he'd look around and say, oh, I was wrong, I guess. Look how the accumulation of capital and private wealth has worked so beautifully to make life so fair for everyone. No, no. No, I don't think Dickens would say that. I don't think so. I think he would get right back to his writing desk and pull out his quill pen and continue railing against economic inequality. But it's Christmas. At least it was Christmas. Not anymore. Strike! All right. Well, we've got quite a week ahead of us here. It's the end of the year, so we have some looking back to do. We have some looking forward to do. So we'll do that. All right. Always good to talk to you. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.